Well, our next distinguished speaker is Government Operation Agency Human Resources Deputy Secretary William Brown. Now, Deputy Secretary Brown has a varied leadership experience from athletics, education, to civil service. His experience in human resources include serving as a director of human resources for the Contra Costa Unified School District and Chief Human Resources Officer at the Riverbank Unified School District. And he was also a high school principal for 10 years. Advocating for all employees is central to his leadership philosophy. In his word, Will said, "We take care of them and they will take care of the people we serve." Will grew up nearby in Del Paso Heights in North Sacramento and earned his BA in education from Fresno State University and master's in education from National University. He is a husband, a father of three, who's also a published author. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Secretary Brown. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bobby. This is awesome. I am going to try to do something I've never done before, and that is give a live presentation. Is it up?
Yes.
Absolutely. We can see everything. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm Will Brown. I'm the Deputy Secretary of Human Resources, and this is awesome to be here. It's an honor to be at the Statewide Disability Advisory Council. Thank you for making time to be here to hear what I have to say. I really hope I'm able to make it worth your while. I plan to give you a little bit about me, my experience, my view of employees with disabilities, and finally, to give you a little inspiration to continue this important work that you do. If I'm correct, there are some people out there who feel like when people look at you, they only see one thing, only one part of who you are. You know, I feel that way too. I'm a member of a number of groups: African-American, male, little portly, ruggedly good looking, I like to think, educated and friendly. No, nobody is one thing and nobody wants to be classified as one thing. You know, how many people feel like people look at you and only see one thing, looking at everyone else. You know, and if I'm right, there's a lot of people raising their hands, wanting to raise their hands, blinking their eyes, or pondering this for this moment. Most people have that in common. No one likes it. But more than that, it's hurtful, destructive, and wrong. And living life, seeing only one thing, makes everyone's life less complete. We'll go into a little bit about me. You know, my father was born in Denton, Texas. Here you have the Fred Moore High School. Originally, it was built in 1895 as the Denton County School for Colors. In 1913, it was rebuilt and named for Frederick Douglass. The Sunday night prior to its opening, it was burned down and not rebuilt until 1949. His mother said enough and moved west to Sacramento. My mother was born in Philadelphia, Mississippi, not far from the place where Emmett Till was murdered for allegedly wolf whistling at a woman in a store, where he was lynched and then thrown into the river. Her father said enough and left in 1958, brought my mother and sister in 1964. They moved to Sacramento. It was their intent to escape the Jim Crow South in search of opportunities to provide for themselves and their families. While they escaped the deep fried racism of the South, they ran into limited opportunities as they tried to make lives for themselves and their families. My father found work as a custodian in Rancho Seco. My mother worked as a housekeeper for elderly and sick. My father had 6 girls, and my mother had a son when they met through mutual friends in Del Paso Heights. And they married in 1970. Together, they had 4, me in 73. In my family, disabilities aren't uncommon, besides the fact that we're all a little bit out of our minds. Important legislation. I have a sister who was born with neurofibromatosis, or elephant man disease. It's a genetic condition that's caused for legs to swell far bigger than they normally would. I also have a brother who was born with a genetic hearing loss, and hearing loss is far more profound in my family. In addition to my brother, I also have 3 nephews who were born either hard of hearing or completely deaf. My family found few opportunities, lower salaries, weaker labor protection, and were usually the first to go when things got tough in their companies. And I know this sounds familiar to you. It was an assumption I made about the disabled community and confirmed with some research that I'm going to share with you in a little bit. Also, lack of opportunities, they tie our experiences together and have been a common struggle since the Civil War. Because of these and other more harsh forms of discrimination, the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. The 14th Amendment provides equal protection of law to citizens and was meant to give former slaves in the South a method to pursue rights through the courts, and has since been expanded to include underrepresented groups such as Americans with disabilities. That was 1868. In 1964, shortly after the murder of those 3 college students in Mississippi, the Civil Rights Act of 64 was passed in the United States. The Civil Rights Act of 64 would not have been necessary if the 14th Amendment had been recognized and respected by all states. Since it was not, people had to continue to fight 96 years later. My career goal was to play football for the Dallas Cowboys. And my plan was to be a high school principal. And it was there that I got familiar with the Individuals with the Disabilities Act. Many of you are probably familiar with IDEA from your experience in school. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act, or EAHCA, was passed in 1975 and later renamed to Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, in 1990, and was intended to provide the least restrictive and most appropriate education for students with disabilities. ACSED was formed in 1976 as Disabled in State Service, DISS, and to advocate for students or for state employees with disabilities. That same year, 1990, was the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. The The Department of Labor says the ADA prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in areas including employment, transportation, public accommodations, communications, and access to government programs and services. To this point in history, 1990, it had been 120 years since the original law, the 14th Amendment, was passed, and Americans were still fighting for their legally protected rights. This picture depicts 8-year-old Keelan Chaffins, who was born with cerebral palsy, participating in the Capitol crawl. And to illustrate the inaccessibility of government services and civil rights for the disabled, over 1,000 people marched from the White House to the U.S. Capitol during session, shed their crutches and chairs, and crawled up the Capitol steps using only their arms and hands to demand the president to sign the ADA into law, which he did. 2012, Government Code 19795 was established to create the State Disability Advisory Council and DAC at each department. That's 144 years later, and the fight raged on. People with disabilities, the little quote at the top, people with disabilities don't get the opportunities in hiring, promotions, raises, and protection. And this is by the incomparable Scott Richmond. Not up to that point, Americans with disabilities could be labeled and institutionalized without any due process. That is something that we have in common with more than the disability. And it's one of those things that tie different communities together. Being institutionalized without due process, violating your rights, those are things that people can relate to, although we don't always take the time to do that. There are about 41 million Americans living with disabilities, or roughly 12% of our population. 7.6 million are 18 to 64 and are employed. On February 24th, 2021, just a month ago, the U.S. Department of Labor statistics reported that people with disabilities are 3 times more likely to be unemployed, regardless of age, race, education, and experience. 8 in 10 are not in the labor force. 8 in 10 for people with disabilities are in the labor force. Extending on Scott Richmond's point, it ain't because of the lack of desire, it's because of a lack of opportunity. When people make assumptions based on one thing about you and it costs you a quality of life, it makes our whole society a darker place. And this idea of people harming you because of one thing is common. It's something that we can all relate to. On average, those Americans with disabilities earn just over $23,000 annually. Does anyone know what the average salary for Americans without disabilities is? And I'll take a moment. That is, it's $52,000 compared to 23. In California, it's over $63,000. So I believe everyone who wants to work should have the opportunity to work. And I think they should be paid fair value for that work. You know, pay disparities among groups in our society would pale in comparison to that of people with disabilities, but it's an experience that we can all relate to. State of California disability parity is 16.6%, meaning the civil service goal is 16% of the labor force. We don't have accurate information on this yet, but we're working to deliver on that promise to Americans looking for an opportunity. In this picture is Brandon Marshall. He has one of the invisible disabilities, borderline personality, and also has probably had a Hall of Fame NFL career. We don't have a lot. I don't have a vote in that decision, but I do root for him as he works to spread awareness about borderline personality disorder. State stats. According to the recent CalHR data, there were 1,438 complaints filed in 2020. 345 of those complaints were based on disability, 18%. Of those cases, 14 were substantiated. The most recent research suggests that about 70% of complainants are correct in their assessment. So we have some work to do there. Meta World Peace, or Ron Artest, as he's otherwise known, struggles with genetic bipolar disorder, another one of those invisible disorders that enabled him to avoid the stigma. Mental and developmental disabilities are common in his family. He also is an NCAA and NBA champion who now advocates for Americans with disabilities. How I was influenced. You know, I serve as Deputy Secretary of Human Resources in the Government Ops Agency, which is a tremendous honor for me and a huge accomplishment considering my start. I arrived here after a long career in education that didn't seem like it was headed anywhere at first. I excelled in elementary school, but struggled in junior high school. And I got into so much trouble early that I nearly got kicked out and made it to high school only due to social promotion. You know, they didn't want someone my age in junior high school, or they thought high school would mature me. When I got to Grant High School, go Pacers, I was put into a remedial slate of classes. When I arrived at my math class, the teacher said, laid out the 4-year plan. And after 4 years on that path, I would not satisfy college requirements and would not be able to go. The next day, I went to my counselor's office, cried, and begged him to change my classes. And although I deserved exactly what I got, he took a chance on me and put me in the college prep track. And to this day, I work to make good on his gamble on me. That experience created in me a spirit of service, a belief that people can be successful if they're given an opportunity motivates me. The spirit of service and setting people up for success translates into every place I've been in my career and has helped me move closer to their potential and to their dreams, all because of what someone did for me in 1987. I wouldn't be here if someone hadn't accommodated for me, and now I hope to do the same for other people I serve. I've carried it into the classroom, the athletic fields, and into administration, accommodating for employee needs, supporting their success, and it's paid off. The good-looking guy in the picture here is Nick Vujicic, born with what's called tetra amelia syndrome, a rare condition that had left him without arms and legs at birth. And at first, his mother didn't want to take him from the doctor. Eventually, she came around and he experienced a childhood that encouraged him to become one of the top motivational speakers in the world. My human resource experience. Anyone could wake up a member of our community. And this is by the peerless Joe Xavier. And the picture is Lieutenant Tammy Duckworth. She was a helicopter pilot in the Iraq War. In 2004, her helicopter was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade where she suffered many serious injuries, including the loss of her legs and some right arm mobility. For this reason, Americans with disabilities is uniquely fluid in its numbers, unlike members of other groups. Anyone could wake up one day as a member of the disabled community, and there are other groups where people will never wake up and be a part of. So the community is open and fluid in ways, really unique ways. Early in my career, I met people who supported and put me in positions to grow and be successful. I made the most of those opportunities, and I did everything I could to make good on their gamble. These experiences created in me a spirit of mentorship and advocacy. I've learned that if you clear a path for people and give them a nudge, they will surprise you. Over the course of my career, the people who I've looked out for have looked out for me, making me a better leader, sharing information, defending me in their circles, bringing great ideas and innovative thinking to work. All have helped me be successful where others haven't. My investment has returned more to me than I've given. Supporting individual needs of others is good for business and the people in influential positions. These experiences have created in me a spirit of we got this. It doesn't matter what department or position you hold, together we're better. And to that end, there are resources for you to take advantage of. The wheels are turning on the governor's directive to create exempt positions at each agency. We have California leads, the Diversity Task Force, Disability Task Force, in addition to SDAC, DAC, and ACSED. Turning poison into medicine. Peter Shore, I had a conversation with him. He said, we need to start educating leaders. We need to advocate for ourselves and others. He's sharing the responsibility, saying that we need to educate our leaders, at the same time be advocating for the people who are within the community. So he's one of my former special education teachers who, as a principal, I use as a sounding board and thought partner for all my students. As it turns out, accommodating for people's needs is a good thing. So I would use special education accommodations in general education classrooms and settings because the special ed department were my experts in accommodations and in modifications and making workable situations out of difficult ones. And you find out that, once again, you'll find this common thread is that we all have more in common than we have that makes us different. Back to turning poison into medicine. Viruses like COVID-19, once it enters your body, it replicates itself thousands of times, which can make you sick or even kill. If you're familiar with vaccines, you know that scientists will use the same virus, weaken it so that it can't replicate, or that it replicates weaker or slower, so that your body has an opportunity to create antibodies, which will protect you from stronger version of the virus. Essentially, the disease becomes the medicine. And in Buddhist teaching, the phrase turn poison into medicine is often repeated, but it doesn't necessarily mean actual poison. It refers to life's challenges, disadvantages, misunderstandings, and of course, disabilities. Pictured here is Cody Lee. He was born with optic nerve hypoplasia, which caused blindness, and he's also autistic. He won the 2019 America's Got Talent competition, getting 50 million votes in 2 weeks. He refused to let the world see him as one thing, and you shouldn't either. One day while serving as a principal, I was standing in the hall working on a Rubik's Cube, and one of my highest performing students walked by, pulled out the one he had in his pocket, and began solving it. He solved it and gave me 2 rules to follow, and then sent me on my way. And I never mastered those rules, but I kept working at it. And 4 months later, one of my special education students walked in, saw me working on that cube. She took it from me and solved it. She turned, handed me the cube, gave me the same 2 rules, and seeing one of my students with disabilities perform the same complicated task as one of my highest performing students is a lesson that never left me. In fact, I made that lesson a foundation for my graduation speech that year. And it said to me on this day, if given opportunity, all students can shine. At work, employees can shine too. They just need an opportunity. Michelle Obama reminds us that we've got a responsibility to live up to the legacy of those who came before us by doing all we can to help those who come after us. Politicians, at least the good ones, make a ton of promises, but also remind us that we have to work too. We all have a responsibility in it. Be encouraged. Don't stop striving for yourself and advocating for others. It's been over 153 years since that 14th Amendment was passed, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, ADA, and 1990. And it's because of one thing that many of us still face discrimination, oppression, and are denied the right to the pursuit of happiness. Human genomics say that we're all 99.6% the same. That 4%, that 0.4% is small, but sometimes people see, sometimes all people see is for far too many of us is the one thing, is the 0.4%. My work and my call to you is to elevate and showcase your many layers and keep inspiring people to do the same. We've come a long way, but still have a way to go. The same way Michelle Obama uplifts large community and people, so do you. You don't know who all you inspire. The truth is, we are all many things and deserve to be seen as whole humans who can shine if given an opportunity. It doesn't matter how many layers there are to you. You just need a few things: support and encouragement. And with that, we all can be at our best. That's the common thread. As a principal, I took pride in the Best Buddies program, advocating for all students to be given opportunities to be given love and support. They all need to be successful in their lives. If you find yourself in need of advocacy and you can't find your own voice, find someone like the SDAC who will advocate for you. You all deserve the very best, and I thank you so much for your time today. There are lots of opportunities and advocacy groups out there who are looking for you. There's also laws that protect you, and it's the people in charge. As people in charge, it's our responsibility to make sure that you have the accommodations that you need and the support you need to be successful. So advocate and continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Brown, for an excellent presentation. You mentioned that this was your first. You did an outstanding job. It was extremely motivational, by the way. And would you have a few minutes to answer questions from our audience?
Absolutely.
Great. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. I see David raising hand, or post your questions in the chat box. David, go ahead, unmute and ask the Deputy Secretary your question.
Thank you. My name is David Francis. I'm actually work for disability insurance within EDD. And Deputy Brown, I just wanted to share with you before I ask my question, that I too have transitioned to the state after working in education for 20 years. I was a high school teacher. 20 years. And so what you were saying about working with students with disabilities and having that exposure really did resonate with me. And one question that I had for you, and I don't know how equipped you are to answer this, but I know that when I talked with a lot of my students who had disabilities, one of the biggest challenges they had entering the workforce was policies that set up that really discouraged entering the workforce. For example, going to work would mean that their income would count against their IHSS income and could possibly lead to a reduction of services. Or their Social Security supplement could go away if they earn if they had more than $2,000 in savings. And of course, how are you supposed to rent an apartment in California if you don't have $2,000 in savings to pay for your deposit? And once again, another student said, I want to work, but if I don't work for 3 years, my student loans are forgiven. It's not worth it for me to go into the workforce now because it'll cost me more money in student loans than it will if I go to work. Do you know if there are discussions in place at either the state or federal level to work at some of these policies that actually actively discourage those with disabilities to enter the workforce?
Thank you. Thanks, David. My brother in education. Hey, it's been 153 years and we still, as a society, haven't gotten it right yet. You try to get closer and closer and make it better and better for people. And then you reveal that there are issues that are, unexpected or unintended problems that are then revealed that need to be worked on. And it sounds like this is one of those unintended issues that need to be worked on. So you want to create opportunities and not discourage people by telling them if they make money, it goes away. Now, I think, if I'm, putting on the DSS hat, which I have no experience wearing, so don't take this anywhere, take it for what it's worth. They may want to, see people bring home salaries where they won't need state service, where they can live, work, and support themselves independently. But I know there's a gray area because it happens in other areas of society where you make just enough to disqualify from programs, but not enough to live. And because of the statutes and the way they're written and executed, you run into that problem where, if you put any work, you show up, you do a good job, and your salary hits a certain point, you lose money and your quality of life goes down. And I don't think that's the spirit of the program. So what we'll have to do is to continue to advocate. Like I say, it's been 153 years and we're still trying to become a more perfect union that meets the needs of everybody. And it requires people to stand up and say, hey, this isn't working. We need to change. It needs a second or third or fourth look. So for the people in that condition, you should let them know to find their voice. And if they can't find their voice, find a group who will speak for them.
So we have a question next from Dan Clark, and then I have a question in the comments. Dan, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Dan, you're still muted. Your hand is raised, so I'm assuming you're asking Secretary under Deputy Secretary Brown a question. So please unmute.
Yes, I'm done. I'm sorry. I had to find a button.
No problem. I have the same issues, Dan. Don't worry.
Yeah. My name's Dan Clark. I'm with ACSED. I also was a vocational rehab counselor with the Department of Rehabilitation. I have to say, we haven't solved all the problems, but we've done a lot. There is a similar benefits programs going on throughout the United States and in California. And to answer that person's question, if they wanted to maybe send an email to Bobby and he can forward it to me, I can provide you some information as where to go to understand these there's been some programs to help offset this process and actually to make the transition so that a person could go to work and using similar benefits that are out there, they can transition to where everything's not taken away, but that gradually moves them on to be independent on their own. So there has been work to be done, and Secretary Brown, you may not have known about it because you probably don't work in this area, but there are programs. So just to let you know that if you go to the Department of Rehab too, they can guide you on to where these similar benefits programs and information is located. So that's it.
I always say that's why you keep smart people around you.
Well,
thank you so much.
No, it's a big world, and we all come from different sites. But yeah, there's more to be done. But there's been a lot done since I became a rehab counselor. So anyway, we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, so I have a question from comments. Jerry asks, is there a place people can get information on the diversity task force?
So those predates me. The cards on the table. This is tomorrow is actually will mark my fifth month in civil service. I actually came out of a school district to come into this role and take this office, sit in the chair. The task forces have been at work since 2019. So those task forces were charged by the governor to put together a recommendation to close the opportunity gap for the different groups and within each department. So they are wrapping up now and sending recommendations to be executed. And so the general population of employees will start to hear about the recommendations and how they're going to be executed at this point. So you won't be able to be a part of those subgroups or those subgroups, but you can definitely ask questions and find out about the work and where they are.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Brown, for that response. The next question is from Catherine Campisi. Catherine is also a board member of ACSED, and I believe she's the recording secretary. So Catherine, please unmute and ask the Deputy Secretary a question.
Sure. Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary, for a wonderful presentation. It was very, very good, both the intersectionality of race and gender and disability and all your history and current issues and your personal perspective. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add a little bit in terms of what Dan added, and I tried to put in the chat. As you said, we still have a way to go, but there are two key programs in California to deal with the work disincentives issue. One is the California Working Disabled Program, and I believe it's under the Department of Healthcare Services. And that program allows people with disabilities that were on previous benefit programs like SSI or IHSS to earn pretty decent wages. I know they were in the 50-something thousand a few years ago, and I believe they're adjusted and maintain their IHSS and Medi-Cal. And then there's also a new program. It's a federal law, but California implemented it called Cal-Able program. And that allows people that had disabilities, significant disabilities as children to set aside, can be an adult now, but to set aside money for disability related expenses. And so I'm trying to put this in the chat to give people a few hints about where those are. And as you said, they're kind of in the health and human services realm. So they're kind of outside your scope, but just so people know that these issues have been worked on, although we still have a way to go. So thank you.
That is exactly why you keep smart people around you. Thank you, Catherine.
You're very welcome.
So we had a question a little bit earlier from Eva about what are the names of the programs or the websites, but it sounds like we covered a bunch. Are there any others that we should cover that you know about?
This is Dan. If on the website, there's a website called Disability 101 that actually goes into some of this. It pretty much ties to Social Security. I have to tell you, recently I haven't been on it and may have been expanded to probably Cal-Able that Catherine just mentioned about. But that's one of the websites that, disability101.org, I believe.
Thank you. I actually have a question for Deputy Secretary. You have such a broad experience in so many different realms. Do you have any advice for DAC or the SDAC in working with human resources to make sure we achieve our advocacy and our goals in a collaborative effort?
Hey, the people who I've met so far are doing a great job. They have their ears to the community, and they are taking those concerns and running them right up the flagpole, up as high as the governor's office. So if I offered you any advice, it would be to continue doing that, to make sure that all voices are heard. And, when you have 4% or 14% of your complaints being found substantiated, when the state, when research says that 70% of the complainants are telling the truth, I would say do more of that. being out there, making your face familiar to people so that they bring their voice. Because, whether you have a disability or not, there are people out there who are struggling. They aren't getting opportunities. They're being discriminated against. They're being mistreated. They're not feeling supported at work. And that's not the spirit of civil service. So I would say to continue doing the work that you're doing. Keep your ear to those communities, hearing what people have to say, finding out what's going on. If there are people out there not being accommodated, make noise for them. Because, the better like I said in the beginning, and thank you, Bobby, for that generous introduction, the better we take care of the people who do the work, the better they take care of the people we serve. This is a service industry. And the higher you go in administration, the more your service is essential. So we serve the people who deliver the goods every day, and it's not the other way around. So the better we know, when you get into administration, the higher you go, I guess, the less direct contact you have with those people with the outward facing jobs who show up every day and deal with all the problems. So the more we can hear, the more information we get from groups like SDAC, the better decisions we can make and the better leaders we'll be. So it would be to continue to talk to those folks out in the field.
Thank you so much. I'm going to throw it back to Bobby.
Thank you so much, Susan. I do have a follow-up question, and that is, I like your analogy that you mentioned earlier when talking about COVID-19 vaccine. You said poison into medicine. I view poison as being the challenges, the obstacles, and barriers that people with disabilities face when they're navigating the complexities of civil service. Add to that complexities, the complaints, the handling of those complaints, processing of those complaints. When there is only 4% of complaints substantiated or received from communities, from people with disabilities in CalHR, what direct action that we can take to improve that? In other words, what call to action would you recommend for the audience of SDAC that they take to improve that statistics and the outcome?
The outcome is to make the organization better. And so, if you're not satisfied with the outcome, then in your contract, there'll be another level. You can appeal almost any decision. And I would say appeal it. Go to the next step in the grievance process, because there's something in the organization that needs a second look. Mm-hmm. So let's compel people to give it a second look. I can assure you that if there's a problem, that person is not the only one suffering from it. Mm-hmm. And so we're all together in this, and we don't always like to look at that. We like to look at that little bitty thing that makes us different. We spend so much time and energy focused on the wrong thing that we don't that the right thing, our common experience kind of gets ignored. So if you're experiencing discrimination, lack of opportunity, or an inaccessible workplace, I'm sure you're not the only one. So if you don't have the voice or you don't think find someone who can. Go to the next level.
Great advice. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Do we have any more questions for Deputy Secretary Brown? If not, I thank you, Deputy Secretary Brown, for an excellent presentation. We really enjoyed what you told us, the wisdom that you shared, your personal experiences. And, I've been getting inquiries. They all love your slides. Would you be in a position to share that with our audience?
I'd be happy to.
Us. If you send it to me, I can distribute that.
Hello, Mr. Secretary Brown. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was muted. Yes, my name is Eduardo. So I had one question. I guess it's more of a comment than a question. So I married into a family of educators. My wife is a teacher. My mother-in-law is a retired teacher. So I wish that at the education system, we would start the kids young with disability awareness. And the reason I say that, I mentioned it once before. So I'm sight impaired, and when I was a youngster, I was ridiculed a lot in school because the books I had were bigger than everybody else's, because I had to put my face up to the desk to read and write, because I had trouble seeing straight, whatever. And so, and it was not pleasant. And so I kind of, so when I got older, I met other folks with visually and other disabilities that went through the same thing. So I kind of wish at the schools, I kind of wish that they would start them young on disability awareness. And I brought this up once before without getting political. It really didn't help. It doesn't help when our former president ridiculed a reporter that had a disability. To me, that's kind of like a big step back, a big step backwards of everything that we're trying to do as far as disability awareness and being aware of people's conditions. To me, that was a big step back. You know, it's a big kick in the gut, as you know, that kind of hit close to home for me. So to me, it's like, okay, we need to educate our leaders and educate our youngsters. So that's more of a comment than a question. But thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
You know, I kind of learned myself, you know, as a leader, how much your words matter, and, you know, how much power, you know, a kind word and how much power a not so kind word has. It hits a lot harder than just anybody. And, you know, without going into politics and getting political, you know, that the leader's words have influence and they have power. So what I would charge leaders to do is to start talking about how great it is to have people with these different perspectives and to start celebrating people. And what's more powerful than one person, or even if that person is a leader, is the voices of the people. So the people out there say, hey, we don't like that. That's not acceptable. And then that voice influences the leaders. If they don't get it already, then they will. So yes, you know, we all, and you know, your deal was you know, a visual disability. You know, some of us are overweight. You know, some of us are up there in years. Some of us have other disabilities. Some of us are female. Some of us are brown, and we have common stories. And we should all look at those things. You know, we all know what it feels like to be made to look or feel small, and that's not okay. We all know what it feels like to be shunned or ignored or not given opportunities or assumptions made about us. That's a common thing, and we should all focus on that. And so, because there's a female who the guys in the office, they like to have locker room conversations where they talk about their conquests, and it makes her feel uncomfortable. You know, her experience is just like yours, and she should say to you, and you should say to her, that we don't like feeling small, and that's not okay. We put our voices together and say so out loud. And if you don't have it, if you don't have your voice, or she doesn't have her voice, then find someone who does, because it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable behavior. And if we all know what it feels like to be made to feel small, then there's no reason. It's unacceptable that we should continue that for any other groups of people, be it disability, be it race, sex, gender, or whatever.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you.
I will share my that presentation with you, and on the front page is my contact information, including my email. In the spirit of finding your voice, you can feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to, like I say, I've only been in state service for 5 months, so I've got a whole lot to learn about how things work here, and all the people who work in the state service, what their functions are, and how that interplay works. And so my orientation is always towards building people up and making an environment where people can be successful. And the only way I can do that is to hear from people. And so in state service, there's 200,000 employees, but there are advocacy groups who have their ear to your communities and they will relay that message to me. And if you want to reach me directly, I'm happy to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Brown. Again, it's been a phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much for your time and the wealth of knowledge you shared. You have yourself a great day, and I look forward to sharing your slides when I receive them.
You do the same. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.